This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Waco 175th Celebration Series presents Spirited Women of Waco, hosted by Ann Harder.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Waco 175th Celebration podcast as we are honoring the spirited women of Waco. I'm Ann Harder and a member of the Jacob Day Cordova Society that is sort of sponsoring this effort. And we've had, over the last few sessions, the opportunity to really dig into some interesting ladies who have helped make Waco what it is today. And one of them is sitting right here next to me, and that is Fiona Bond. Fiona didn't actually grow up here in Waco, as you can tell when she speaks.
I know it's very difficult to tell that I'm not Waco born and bred. I was about to accuse you of being a bona fide spirited woman of Waco.
No, not me.
So no, totally. I love that we're talking about spirited Waco women with being led by a spirited Waco.
Well, of course, Fiona, you are just such a delight. It's wonderful to be around you anytime I have that opportunity.
Thank you.
And you are out at everything. I mean, you are really.
I can no longer do everything.
But you do as much as you can.
Team.
But originally from Kent in the United
Yes.
Kingdom, and of course educated in Scotland, as I recall, and spent some time at Cambridge.
Yes,
Cambridge,
yes.
really?
I actually ran a program for Cambridge University called Theology Through the Arts, and ended up writing a book called The Arts in Your Church, which was, this kind of looking at theology as it is explored through the many different languages of the arts, given that usually the mode for doing theology is written or spoken word. Mm-hmm. And of course, each art form gives us a whole language of our embodied nature that is a great way to explore all kinds of things.
Well, amazing. I mean, you had a wonderful life, I'm sure, in the UK. How did you get to Waco? I know Baylor had something to do with it, maybe.
Yes, I mean, the short answer is my husband got a job offer from Baylor, and the slightly longer version of the story is that I was the person that said, I'm not sure I want to live in Waco, Texas. And so very cleverly, Baylor invited us both out to come and see Waco, knowing that at the time I was working in a city called Dundee in Scotland, which when I started working in Dundee, it was affectionately known as the cultural armpit of Scotland. And I was privileged to be part of the reinvention of Dundee through cultural investment. And whether this was by serendipity or design, when I first saw Waco, it reminded me so much of Dundee. Of course, they're in very different climates, but actually the economy and the size and the the relative distance to other larger cities was very similar. The issues that a city the size of Waco faces are the same the world over, and we absolutely fell in love with Waco. And the rest is history.
The rest is history. So how long ago was that?
It was actually 13 years ago
Really?
now.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
How crazy is that?
Yeah.
No, it was more than that. It was,
So you're not a newcomer anymore.
I am not. No, I can
you really
definitely
have
call myself a Waco woman now.
You have jumped in with both feet. That is, as they say here in Texas. And, of course, Creative Waco is something you founded. Let's talk a little bit about that, because it really kind of lends to our spirited lady we're going to talk about.
It's why I dove into this story in the first place. Well, Creative Waco was founded really as a mechanism for growing arts and culture in Waco. Of course, we have many fantastic, world-leading even arts and cultural innovations, organizations, nonprofits, and also, of course, teaching capacity in Baylor, MCC, and TSTC. We had all kinds of leading arts programs in every artistic discipline, but had not yet woven that into a narrative that would make us a cultural destination and that allowed us to tell a kind of joined up story, but also allowed us to develop a strategic approach to how we grow arts and culture in this part of the world. So that's what Creative Waco does. Of course, we do all kinds of, I always say we're not a programming organization, except we do quite a bit of programming too. We're accidental programmers, so we absolutely do the, strategic development, deployment of funding, bringing in funds that no other organization is kind of equipped to bring in, for example, from federal sources and from state sources in order to empower arts organizations in Waco. But we also do things like public art. So we work very closely with our city and county to do things like the sculpture zoo, plenty of murals.
Lots of murals.
And actually our mural program, the murals are a byproduct. It is a workforce development program called Art Apprenticeship.
Great.
And the actual product is young people who know how to take an artistic or creative concept from idea to implementation. And all the skills, the hard and soft skills required to do that and to work with a client, all that kind of thing. And then, of course, we get to play in the larger playground of the state of Texas. We just hosted the statewide Arts Advocacy Summit for arts leaders across the state at the gorgeous Cambria Hotel. And we were so proud to showcase Waco to the arts world across our state.
Well, and you're president, I understand,
Yes.
of Texans for the Arts.
Currently serving my second term as president.
That is awesome. That is wonderful. I'm just, breathless listening to all that you do. And that brings us to really the purpose of this podcast, and that's to showcase a lady from the past.
Yes.
And, well, in fact, two ladies, to be perfectly honest. We're going to talk about a living woman as well. But we're going to start off talking about Gussie Oscar.
Yeah.
Who was like during the Victorian era in
early part of the
early
20th
part of it
century
as a younger woman. But yeah, let's just talk a little bit about her. Her parents came here from Germany.
Yes.
Came to Texas.
Well, and I should maybe explain a little as to why I discovered her in the first place. Because we are right in the process as a community right at the moment of looking at investing in a new performing arts center by the river. And as I looked into Waco's history, and I have Eric Swanson to blame for this, he asked me to write something for one of their magazines about the performing arts history of Waco. And as I was digging into that, and I had already heard about the Waco Auditorium, which was, at the time that it was built in 1899, it was built by a group of business leaders from Waco when Waco's population was little more than 20,000, and they built a 3,000-seat performing arts center.
Wow.
In our downtown area, right next to the courthouse, and it was extremely successful, certainly for its first few seasons, pre-World War One. But it came to be run a few years in. It was run by this absolutely remarkable woman named Gussie Oscar. And to have a woman running a performing arts center at the time was unusual, to say the least. She was apparently small, feisty. She was extremely well connected. She was Jewish, and she also had, like, that Jewish identity was a big part of just the connections she was able to make in, by then the absolutely burgeoning world of Hollywood and of the arts in New York. She would go and spend every summer in New York just hanging out with arty types of all kinds and bringing incredibly famous people back to Waco who adored her. They all loved her.
Now, she was born, though, in Calvert, correct?
She was born in Calvert.
Her parents immigrated from Germany, and he was a bit of a impresario as well, built an auditorium in Calvert.
And yes, which may seem
and a hotel.
Unexpected. So yes, and she was known throughout her life for living in hotels. She was very unconventional in that I don't think she ever owned a house. She lived in hotels her entire life.
That was probably
It was scandalous. It was
That's right, a
considered
bit of
scandalous.
a eyebrow raiser.
Yes, but was probably quite a good way for her to meet the people she needed to meet.
Yeah.
But she'd been
I think
raised
early
in
on,
a-
I think she was party girl. I think she
Oh,
did like
she
to
was
party.
definitely a party
She was
girl.
playing the piano, and everybody was dancing and having a
yes.
big time around the
well,
gay
and
'90s and all that.
You and I both know musicians that fall into that category who, when they're playing, everyone's dancing. Gussie was definitely that. So she was raised in a hotel. And so for her, hotel was home.
That was home, yeah.
And so it probably wasn't as unusual for her as it might have been for some other folks. But definitely in slightly more conservative Waco, that was considered pretty unusual.
Right.
And she really, she had such an interesting cultural mix from the get-go. Obviously, her parents ran a performing arts center as well. So she was raised with both performing arts and hotels.
Yeah, it was in her blood, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely in her blood. And she actually went to a convent school in Austin. And I can only imagine what that path looked like. I would love to have been a fly on the wall in some of her
But
classes.
I think that's where she really kind of fell in love with the performing and probably
Absolutely.
honed a lot of her
She
musical
got an
skills.
amazing
What
musical
I was really
education.
impressed about her, she became a conductor. She
Yes.
was, and that had to have been very unusual for a woman.
Not only that, but she led an all-female orchestra.
Why not?
And right, I mean, talk about, I'm guessing their parties were fun. She, that was incredibly innovative at that time. And so she had obviously found or attracted these other like-minded women who they became a thing. Even to the point that she conducted touring Western Canada at one point before she took up the role in Waco. But she was pretty well known. I mean, she was, I think I would hazard a guess that she was probably an extrovert.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly everything about her life seems to imply that she was very good at meeting people and becoming friends very quickly.
But clearly very talented because she had the performance chops, I think, to do what she was able to do.
Well, and she had that unusual combination. She started, when she started in Waco, she started as first a musician. She was
Correct.
a pianist.
Piano, yeah.
Yes, and she was coming in to play for productions. She very quickly moved on to playing and conducting and leading musical programming. And then from that, she became the general manager. So she must have had some skills in terms of organizing people, leading people.
Management, all
and
that.
Maybe, I'm thinking probably being innovative. People seem to like her ideas. She went on programming and performing right the way through to her death. And even after the decline of the Waco Auditorium, she was still doing programming for Cotton Palace, for Waco Hall, and for the Town Hall. Apparently the Town Hall had a program at that point, and she was doing all the programming for all of those.
Yeah, but she did run afoul of the authorities.
Isn't
more
this
than
the
once.
bit that you just love? I mean, you're going,
Well,
this
she
is-
a little bit racy, maybe some of the costumes and some of the shows, and there was a committee of Wacoans who were the censor committee, and they would check out a show before it was able to be staged, or that was the idea, is to check it out beforehand. It didn't necessarily work out that way, but and they could say, no, this does not meet community standards. You cannot have the show. But the other is that for whatever reason, I think the Birth of the Nation had to be on a Sunday. Well, that violated
Yes,
blue laws.
the blue laws in Waco. And yes, she was very good at pushing the boundaries,
Yes,
I
she
think
did.
I would say. And how interesting that she felt able to do that in Waco, because I think often, certainly my reading of Waco history is that it maybe wasn't a place that was known for being particularly adventurous culturally. And actually her story has completely blown that
Absolutely.
preconception out of the water, because I think even the people that were on that censorship panel, they let her do things that, maybe if it hadn't been Gussie, they would have had more questions about. She would do a lot of brand new theatre, which I'm so glad to see that we have that coming back to Waco. We have 9 theatre groups now.
We do.
Who
It
are
is just
producing
remarkable.
brand new things,
Lots
which is
of
fantastic.
groundbreaking.
Yeah, lots of world premieres now happening in Waco. But that was something that Gussie pioneered. And she had some productions that were just for women, that were about things like a pregnancy that
and
was
you just
unexpected.
wanted to have just women.
Yes, and so not too surprisingly, some of that was considered controversial. She had flapper girls appearing in a chorus at one point, which I think was considered pretty scandalous at the time. That was definitely a New York look that Waco hadn't quite experienced yet. And then she did produce a couple of things. She got arrested twice for producing things on a Sunday. And doing programming on a Sunday, which, given that at that point there were real financial difficulties with the auditorium, I'm guessing that was probably a last-ditch attempt to make it profitable. Recognizing that, maybe there wasn't a huge amount of programming on a Sunday afternoon in Waco. And it was things like Birth of a Nation, as you say. But how interesting that she definitely did not feel inhibited by the rules that surrounded her, and yet was incredibly loyal to Waco. She didn't try to take her career somewhere that may have been a little more aligned with some of her more adventurous experiments. I really love that Waco embraced her, and she embraced Waco. I think that's a very Waco story.
And some of the people who appeared on Waco's stages, George M. Cohan and William Jennings Bryan, and some of these names from history.
Yes, and she knew the
Astairs, in.
Fred Astaire.
Of course, Jules Bledsoe, of course, was from here, and he did a one-man show. I thought it was interesting, the famous concert pianist, I guess, Paderewski. He was not able to sell enough tickets, so he canceled his.
But yes, she was bringing Houdini.
She was bringing amazing people.
Will Rogers, Sarah Bernhardt, Fred and Adele Astaire. I mean, there's just a whole kind of catalogue of leading names of the day. She was often part of their discovery story, certainly for the Astaires.
Right. They were on their way up.
Yes, and she kind of spotted them before they became too famous to afford.
Yeah, that's where the impresario. I mean, she truly was.
She was a good spotter of talent, and I love that she also diversified the stage as much as she could. At that time, that was a very difficult thing to do.
And I'm sure that was raising some eyebrows as well.
Yes,
from
absolutely.
Some sectors,
I think she was someone who recognized how important that was going to be for this community's growth, and and followed through with that, which is great.
Yeah. So what, to kind of wrap up Gussie Oscar for this portion of the podcast, you just something that stands out about her. Maybe something that you'd like to, having your own life.
Yes. Well, that's 2 very powerful questions. I mean, something that really stands out about Gussie is that she was obviously well loved right up until her death, despite the fact that she had been definitely unconventional, sometimes controversial. She was still asked to program things in Waco. So there was also a relationship of trust there, which I really like, because I think often that is what our creatives do. They take us out of our comfort zone, but also we have to do that within a relationship of trust. So I think that probably answers the second part too, as to what I would consider most important. She was trusted her whole life long. And that is, I really think in a community the size of Waco, you can do nothing without trust.
Well, now to take a phrase from Monty Python, now for something completely different.
or is it?
Or is it? We want to talk about President Terry Parton, who is the leader of the Wichita and affiliated tribes. Now, this is a lady who is alive.
Yes, and who actually just stepped down from that role. Yeah. So I partly wanted to, honor her as a representative of this, really this whole line of incredibly strong women. It is something of a matriarchal society, I'm learning. The tribes that were indigenous to this part of the world that are now part of the Wichita and affiliated tribes, it is often the female line that is recognized in what records we have. And one of the things that President Terry Parton helped me to understand was that a lot of the really tangible history of the women who would have been leaders of that tribe in this area, even before that 175th year ago founding of Waco as we know it, going way back, maybe thousands of years, they were the ones who were figuring out where the fertile farmlands were, the aquifers and the water that then became characteristic of Waco because those artesian wells were very much part of its identity. Of course, it was the indigenous tribes who clustered their farmlands around the artesian wells. And it was the women who were right at the center of that culture. And so Terry, as leader of the Wichita and affiliated tribe, really she was leader, I believe, for a period of about 25 years.
Really?
So really for a significant amount of time. And she helped me to understand that even though we may have lost many of the individual names, that culture of women leading their communities and being the ones who empower others to have a voice is something that I not only heard from her, but witnessed her doing. When she led a delegation of leaders from the Wichita and affiliated tribe, she was so good at always giving time and space for all of the people around her to have their say. She taught me so much about leadership just by the way that she was making sure that all voices were heard before she made a pronouncement or a decision. There's something so dignified about that.
Well, so she was here in Waco for...
Yes.
Tell me about how you met her.
Yes. Well, and this was another one of those kind of serendipitous pathways. We were working on some public art for the airport. And one of the things that came up in that conversation was we really wanted to pay tribute in that whole project to not just Waco's multicultural history, but also its indigenous history. So there's a whole wall at the airport now, just above where you claim your bags after you've got off a plane, which is a pattern from the grass houses that were made by the Wichita tribes. And when we were first working with that project, we worked with Derek Ross, who is a direct descendant of the Waco tribe, now living back in Waco with his family.
Yeah, I've had him on a podcast.
Yes, he's
before.
a wonderful guy. And he introduced me to Terry as leader of the Wichita and affiliated tribes, because any cultural decisions need to go through the tribal leadership, of course. And when I originally reached out to Terry, I mean, she's somebody who probably has about 500 emails a day to try to navigate, and you can't answer them all. But she was always very gracious about making time for the things that really mattered. But what she helped me to understand is that their processes for developing any kind of cultural project are not about a simple, yes, hey, that looks like a grass house, sure, you get the thumbs up, we'll give our blessing. It's, if you're going to do something that carries our culture, we need to know you. Oh, yeah. We need to develop a relationship. We need to know what this pathway looks like for our community. And so from early conversations, which were intended to connect around that specific project, we then very quickly moved on to, well, who do you need to connect with in our community? What are the opportunities for young Indigenous people in Waco? What are the educational opportunities through Baylor? What are the potential business opportunities and entrepreneurship opportunities? How can we maybe investigate what it looks like to reseed our community with some of the ingenuity and cultural identity that comes from the tribes that made this place their home before we came. And she was incredibly gracious with that process, really helped us to gather a round table of people that they needed to connect with, and that we now have ongoing relationships with. So there are now multiple conversations going on. And actually, just this week, we submitted a federal grant application to do some cultural development with the Wichita and affiliated tribes,
That's
which I hope
awesome.
very much will come to fruition. Yeah. But all of that was very much, she would never, ever say to me, Fiona, if you want to work with us, you're going to have to do X, Y, and Z, and we don't work like a normal city or county infrastructure of governance. Instead, she would lead by example. And she would say, well, let's talk more about that and let's bring in some other people. And she would absolutely graciously, and just because of who she is and how she operates, would lead us into how to create projects, programs, and all kinds of possibilities, opportunities between our community and the Wichita and affiliated tribes.
Just absolutely a perfect example of a spirited woman.
Absolutely, yes.
Of Waco.
In every sense.
In every sense. Fiona, it's been just wonderful to delve into these interesting characters and learn more about them and how they contributed to things here. And there are a number of things that the newly formed Jacob de Cordova Society has been doing to mark the 175th anniversary of Waco's founding.
Yeah.
Last March 1st and 2nd, kind of a kickoff, and a proclamation by the city. A documentary is in the process
I'm
of
so
being
excited. I hear it's going really
being worked
well.
on as we speak on Jacob de Cordova, who maybe his history hasn't been as well known in the community as it might be, but he called Waco my beautiful daughter. As he, helped lay out the city for people to buy the various plots of land, and it's going to premiere next November. Also in the fall, a scavenger hunt. And we're excited about that on September 7th. And it's going to be held through Waco History and Historic Waco Foundation.
Wonderful.
And at the end of the scavenger hunt, again, this is on a Saturday, everything will be kind of wrapped up at the Earl Harrison House, and there'll be refreshments and fun things. And it's very much a family-oriented event. And Kelsey Ray, did you get a chance to meet her early?
Yes,
she's a
I did.
wonderful entertainer and
Lovely
songwriter.
musician, yes.
She and her band will be there to perform a few songs, including a song that she wrote for all of this, Waco, a City to Believe in. And we're still looking for sponsors. If anybody wants to help with that, $500 to $5,000 to help work on that event. And the previous night on September 6th, a kickoff at Texas Music Cafe.
Oh, wonderful.
And Kelsey will be there to perform there, but there's going to be music and heavy hors d'oeuvres and drinks and all that kind of thing for an evening event.
My hors d'oeuvres to be heavy. Yeah,
we want them to be heavy. $75 a person for that, and it's going to be loads of fun for appetizers and drinks. As you can see, we've got some wonderful sponsors. Want to tell you who they are. Rogue Media Network, thank you very much. Creative Waco, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Waco Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Texas Jewish Historical Society, Waco Educators Alliance, and the Jacob de Cordova Society. So I want to thank all our great sponsors as we honor and celebrate the city of Waco, 175 years. Celebrate the fact that Fiona Bond has come here with her husband, her family, to make things so much better.
Thank you so much. And I mean, truly, Waco is a very exciting place to be living and working in right now.
It is. So your opinion changed from that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm always happy to admit when I'm wrong. And I have to take my hat off. You guys have done an amazing job of weaving together so many organizations to support the 175th anniversary. So hurrah for that. I'm looking forward to all those events. I'll try and make it to them all.
It's going to be loads of fun. And this is our way of kind of letting you know about all that's coming up and sort of laying the groundwork. This is the last in our 3-part series on Spirited Women of Waco, but
we know there are more.
There are more. There are way more. So stay tuned, as they say in the television business. But thank you so much for being with us, and we hope to see you again next time.
Thank you, Anne.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.